rises on a shot of vegetation from our garden. Let me remind you that the guide is based on my study skills book, Making Sense of Essay Writing, an introduction to the skill. And here is a picture for your delectation of the front cover of the book. I think that's enough, so we'll just tuck him away in a corner. And before we go any further, I would like to issue a word of caution. And what better way than with a set of traffic lights? Here comes a reminder that this is a very important thing to bear in mind. A word of caution. As our little man or woman sitting at the keyboard there says, it's like learning to drive. What do I mean by that? Well, when you get into the driving seat for the first time, that is, assuming that you've managed to remember to get in the driver's side, you're confronted with a whole range of skills that you're supposed to achieve at once. Check the mirror, handbrake off, clutch depressed, mirror checked, and so forth. And it's a pretty daunting task. You try moving the jigsaw puzzle around, and for a while you think, oh, I will never get anywhere with this. I'll take a taxi instead. But one fine day, you find that everything clicks together. But that's not until you've made considerable effort and practiced time and again. There you are. You've passed your test. And you're in your bright new car. And off you get. I do not advise, by the way, that you try any of this at home or on the roads, especially the last little bit. So, where do we go from here? Right. There are 3 stages to writing a proficient essay. Before, during, and, wait for it, after, which perversely comes in from left field. And of these 3, the one that is most neglected is after. We'll concentrate on that later. But just whisk those off the screen. And he's whisked off the screen as well. Now, here comes a panel of things to do before you write an essay. There he is back again. You won't get rid of him that easily. Before. Now, there are a number of things that you have to do before you put plume to parchment, pen to paper, or fingers to keyboard. And these first 2 things I can't do anything about because you should have done them before you come to write the essay. First of all, you have to know your subject. Essays on Hamlet, if you haven't read the text, are very few and far between, and they're pretty awful, I can assure you. On top of that, make sure that you learn dates, names, and so forth. And thirdly, and also importantly, that you learn any quotations, particularly if it's a literary text. But you'll find that there are quotations in history, geography, and so forth, which can be useful in your presentation of the essay. Right, now this is where I come in. You're about to do an essay. If you have a choice, choose the question carefully. Go for one that you think, hey, I think I can manage that. I think I can do that quite well. Don't just take the first one on the list and wish you had never done so after a few moments. Right, next, very important advice coming up. Read the question. And it's so important, I'm going to repeat it in a nice pillar box red. Read the question. Why do I say that? Well, lots of people fail at this first hurdle. If it says, analyse any 2 plays by Shakespeare, don't do 3 plays by Shakespeare or 3 plays by somebody else. Read each key word in the question, and it is a great help, I can say, if you underline the keywords in the title. and then come back to them later and ensure that you have fulfilled all the tasks that have been set to you. And one other thing is, do make notes. If an idea occurs to you and you're in the middle of something else, scribble it down, and then when you really need it, you won't be struggling in your mind to think about it. You will be having it on your piece of paper. So always have notes, and that, folks, is the end of before. And our friend zooms off in a different direction. Now then, what comes after before, during? All those little bits of confetti that I have to put together in order to arrive at this. First of all, you have to make a plan. It doesn't have to be really detailed. It depends on what you feel comfortable with. But you've got to start off from a particular point. You've got to argue your way through a case, and you've got to come to conclusions. So set out the plan of your essay. Now then, number 2, the contentious one. Use good English. Now I'm going to get in trouble with some of your teachers or tutors by saying I don't believe there is such a thing as good English. What there is a standard English, which changes over the decades and over the centuries. And it's the safest and most straightforward way of expressing yourself, and that is the language you should use for writing an essay. Don't go for "in it, bro," or things like that. Don't be too informal, and don't be over formal. Straight down the middle. Let the words say what they want to say. Right, next up. Once you've started with good English, all the elements of good style have to be followed, beginning at the lowest level with punctuation, spelling, word choice, style, sentence, paragraph. All those topics are explored in depth in my guide, and there is another guide, a more advanced guide to this subject, in which everything else is covered in greater detail, and I very much welcome you to have a go at it. Now, thirdly, the third lot of stuff during is that you have to set your essay out properly. This is quite a subject, so let's give it a brief run through. Introduction, central section or bit in the middle, and conclusion. Right, here we go. Introduction, roughly that size. This is a very crude piece of illustration. The bit in the middle should be something like that, in which you put forward your argument, starting with a little argument and building up to the punchline. Therefore, Hamlet is a tragedy. And then there's the conclusion, which should match the introduction in size, and in which you can demonstrate that you have made advances from what you say you're going to say in the introduction to what you are exploring in your conclusion. As I say, and I bet you know what I'm going to say now, it's all in the book in greater detail. And here is a little taster of the more advanced study guide, in which I give a detailed example, step by step, of a rather facetiously titled essay, Discuss the Pros and Cons of Riding a Bicycle on the M1 motorway. Have a look at that. Right, now we've done with before and during, and next up in the list, after. Here is a vitally important piece of advice. If you can, and you're not writing up to some silly deadline which you've completely forgotten because you've spent time either with your significant other or in the students' union bar or both, leave time to review. The longer you leave your essay to stew, the more you'll be able to come and look at it with a detached, more jaundiced eye and pick up on the errors you've made, the corrections you'd like to make, the improvements that you could include. One piece I suggest you do, which is a bit of a chore, but it's well worth doing, especially if you have a bit of bother with English, is to create a list of your favourite errors. If you can't spell particular words quite well, or if you muddle one word up with another, make a list of the words that you get wrong and update that list with every essay you write. And notice, especially if you're using the computer to write, then the spell checker will help you out in this regard. Next up, the form of the essay. Starting with punctuation, moving up to word, sentence, and paragraph. Paragraphs in particular are a point of weakness. You can either have huge, great long paragraphs which are wrong, or paragraphs with single sentences in them, which are almost certainly wrong. Before going any further, there's one important point I should make about these aspects of reviewing your essay, and that is, do not have a scattergun approach. I'll look for all these mistakes at once. Oh, no, you won't, because you won't find them. You must be consistent. You must take time to look at each one of the potential errors separately. And the next one, remember back to what I said right at the beginning, but before writing the essay, about underlining the keywords in the title. Get back to that list and check with the title and ensure that you have achieved what the essay asked you to do. I know you think that's silly advice, but the number of students who have said to themselves, I don't like this question particularly, but I'm going to write my answer and try and force it to fit in. And I've got a couple of quotes that I can drag kicking and screaming into the essay, even though they're not particularly relevant. First, and then finally, I suggest you have a look at the introduction to your essay and the conclusion, one after the other, to ensure that the introduction sets out what it's going to do, and ensure also that the conclusion indicates that you have made progress in so doing. Also, look at that plan of the essay and make certain that you have included all the bits and pieces you want. Now, against this rather attractive white flower background, guess who's coming to dinner on the left at the bottom? Other odds and ends that don't really fit in anywhere completely. The first one is if you have to read your essay aloud. The second one is if you have to do essays under examination conditions. The book offers great advice for that. This is not the place to go over those aspects of the essay in full detail. One very, very common essay error is that you don't write proper sentences. Either you've written a sentence without a verb in it, or you've written a sentence with 3 or 4 bits in it, all separated by commas and none of them really hanging together correctly. Write proper sentences. Don't write great long sentences to impress people, and don't have a series of terribly short sentences which are extremely tedious. Now for a piece of advice, which I bet you're going to hate me saying this because I'm sure you won't do it, and it is, do not cheat. Do not go to one of those websites which promise to write a magnificent essay for you only for a few hundred rubles or whatever they're charging, and therefore you hand it in and you get a mark. Because the point of essay writing is to go through every process yourself and to have a go at it and to ensure that you are improving all the time. And that is why, as my little man or woman in the corner says, don't cheat, because the only one you're cheating is yourself. You have cheated yourself of the opportunity of going through the process and learning and improving and seeing what your tutor or teacher has to say. That also helps. So, next up, let's put a match to that little lot and turn them all off. Oh, yes. Enjoy writing ever-improving essays as a result of this magnificent advice. So, that's the general introduction. Please have a look at the more advanced guide, which will give you more detail, particularly about the structure of your essay. Bye-bye to all that little lot, and to the little man or woman in the corner. And just a word from our sponsor to say that Making Sense of Essay Writing is available to you for giveaway prices, as you can see, and it's well worth reading. I'm not making huge sums on it. I just want as many people as possible to benefit from all these words of advice. And if you have been listening and watching, thank you for doing so.